Kids, today the video is called Molestation. I'm going to talk about molesting. Now, this is something I have to confess that I do not know firsthand about. I can imagine it a little bit, but I can also imagine another side of it. Now, full disclaimer first, I only have two rules in life: leave the kids and the animals out of it. That is my two morals. It's the only two morals that I own or have or think anything about. Now, having said that, I was a victim of multiple brutal rapes, which is a whole different cookie in my estimation from being molested. Now, the reason being, when you're raped, it's an act of violence. When you're molested, it's an act of seduction. Usually the molester is seducing the person into caving into their will, as opposed to just violating them. They do that in their own head, and they do that through their actions. You don't often hear, there's a fine line between being molested and being raped. Being raped is something totally against your will, whereas being molested is being seduced into a situation that you may regret later, or that should not have happened because someone should be more responsible than the adult in the group, so to speak. Now, when I talk about this not only because of the Sandusky trial, and I saw all the hate that went around for that, but having lived my life and in my particular lifetime, there was a point where first of all, I was shocked by this. 1 in 3 girls are molested, sexually molested, and 1 in 6 boys are sexually molested in this country. And that was shocking at the frequency of how often it happens. Now, that's not even counting rape and all the other things. Now, having become a sexual entity at a young age, younger than most. I became sexually active at the age of like 9.5. By the time I was hitting my 14, 15-year-old time frame period, and pretty much since I had shot up and was much taller, I was a tall guy earlier than a lot of my friends. And I looked older. By the time I was 16, I was passing, getting in bars easy, not a problem. So that let me into a world that put me in the position of being a minor predator, so to speak. Because if you go into a bar and you're supposed to be 21 and you're only 16, and no one's even questioned you, and you saddle up to the bar for a cocktail and start checking out the action and trying to get laid, then it becomes who is molesting who. Certainly in my case, more than on one occasion, I had sex with adults that didn't know I wasn't an adult, and I would have been horrified to know that I had done something that would put them in jail when it was all about me. So that in itself says something. It's not always the case that all these child molesters that you see happen to be guilty of predatory child molestation. Now, if it's something serial, and obviously 10-year-olds or 9-year-olds, or something like that, and the guy's like 60, yeah, okay, we have an issue there. But if it's someone that's in their like 30 or less, and it's somebody that's 16 or older, that might be the person that's 16 or older is the one that started the whole thing to begin with. And a lot of times, particularly if you're in an adult situation, i.e. a bar that supposedly serves 21 and over, you shouldn't have to be worried about the person next to you being a minor. And you shouldn't have to ask them to without ID. Now, a lot of times boys come back later and say, oh, I was a victim because they fell in love or they wanted something they didn't get, or etc., etc. And I find that just as criminal as the adult that's actually at that point the victim. Only because I lived that situation myself. Now, I don't excuse child predators. Believe me, I don't. I think that adults have plenty of choices. They don't need to be playing with kids at all, ever, any time. But what I am saying is that sometimes children can get themselves into situations, into adult situations, intentionally, and put themselves not at risk, but they're actually going after an adventure, a conquest, a dream, a fantasy. And children aren't these innocent little mindless, things that don't turn into responsible adults till the magic of 18. That's just not the case. So it needs to be put in context sometimes. I know the passions run deep, but there are a lot of predatory children out there looking for older people. And I, having been in that situation myself and being fortunate to be 6'2" at a young age and pretty much look the way I always have, I was fortunate enough to get away with murder at a young age. Absolute murder. And I would never have blamed anyone that touched me, because normally it was me instigating it anyhow. And that's just the plain fact of it. So before people's passions rise, look at the individual situation. Now, obviously, if the kid is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and sometimes even a little bit later, they could have needs, emotional needs, that are easily attracted by these adult predators. Because, for example, I had adopted child syndrome, so I always wanted to please everyone all the time. It was like survival code. And people that have been adopted know exactly what I'm talking about. So if a predator had come for me, chances are I would have submitted to the predator just to please them. But that would have been different than me going out and hunting one, an adult, just for a thrill, just to get laid or whatever. That was a whole different monster. So there is a difference. And sometimes adults get into situations where they become victims of children. And that's why myself particularly, I am extremely careful. I've been extremely careful my entire adult life. If you even look like you're under 30, I just want nothing to do with you. Seriously, I have no use for kids at all in any kind of sexual way at all. It's just against the very grain and fiber of my soul. That's the same thing with animals, and some people like to play with animals and stuff, but I think that's absolutely gross and disgusting. But my point on molestation is, it is something different than rape. In all circumstances, the intent is different by the person doing it, and the feeling is different by the person receiving it. Because most of the time, it feels like you're being loving or doing something or earning something, as opposed to just strictly being violently violated, which is a whole different emotion, I guess. What are your thoughts? I would love some feedback on this, because since I have never been molested and now way too old to be molested, I know I will never have that experience. But having been raped twice, violently twice, I know what that feels like, and I know the scars that it leaves, and I'm sure molestation does too. So I'd like to hear from people that have been molested, and explain to me or share with us how it was for you. Talk to you later.